Some photographers, is that more or less right? Yeah, I see some nods. My daughter, Jamie, I want you to cheer for her like she's a rock star. All right, let's get going. I'm just going to get this up and running here. Is his head round from over there? I don't want it to be stretched out. Does it look right?
I can't tell from this angle.
It doesn't matter. He'll adjust. I just wanted to, I have some good news and some bad news. The bad news is I have 110 or so slides. The good news is all of them are pictures but two. I have two slides with bullets. Everything else is a picture, okay? And I just wanted to spend some time introducing myself just a little. I'll try not to take too long for that. I want to show two case studies of some recent projects and then talk about the contrast between being a freelancer, being in a corporation, being at an agency, small studio. I've been in the business for 20 years now. I'm actually older than I look. I'm 40-something. And my oldest daughter got married, if that tells you anything. So I've been in the business for a while, and I've had lots of experiences in these different environments, and I wanted to kind of contrast those a little for you guys, and then at the end maybe give you a little sage advice that you can take with you. Hopefully it'll be of some worth to you. So we'll just jump right in. I am a full-time freelancer. I've done all the other things, and I've been on my own for 6 years now. It's always been, so far, so good. I've always had projects, and that's where I spend most of my time. That's just our family room. That Mac there has some pretty heavy-duty hardware in it, and has 64 gigs of RAM and has 2 graphics cards for After Effects, and it puts off so much heat, I have to have it in our family room. And whenever I'm using that regularly, our power bill goes up double. I'm not exaggerating, it goes up double. And I used to lecture my kids about turning off lights and stuff. She can vouch for that. And it turned out to be that computer. It was like this crazy thing. Hopefully the new one that they just came out with is more efficient. But anyway, my Darth Vader mask from when I was an 8-year-old in 1977 is up there. You can kind of see that's a Cintiq tablet. Have you guys ever used a Cintiq tablet? You actually draw right on the screen. They're great. Best money you could ever spend if you're an artist. Just have one of those. I love that thing. This is where I spend almost all of my time. This is just our living room. I'm usually on this computer here more than anything. And then I have another workstation where I plug in downstairs to run Time Machine and stuff for this computer. Just a really brief history of where I've been. That's a timeline of my career so far. I started out way on that end over there. I'll talk about that first job, but this just gives you kind of a bird's eye view of my experience and how long I've been doing it. Down at the bottom, in this area right here, you can see that I got an associate's degree at Salt Lake Community College. I worked for a couple of years. I got married somewhere in here and realized I needed more schooling. All my peers were graduates from the U of U, and they were just so much more articulate. The way they approached design was so much more sophisticated than anything I had ever experienced. So I'm like, okay, I've got to go back to school. And it took me 8 years. I was working full time. I don't expect you to be able to read that, but it just gives you a general idea. I spent a lot of my career, 12 years or so, through this period at the LDS Church or BYU or affiliates. I designed many of the versions of LDS.org, Mormon.org, all the Mormon stuff. And I was sitting in my office one day, and there was a cement wall, and I noticed the cement was kind of old, so I started chipping away at it. And over time, I dug a hole big enough to climb out. And I broke out of there, and I left my tie on the table, and got out of there, and I went to work for Richter 7. They're an ad agency in Salt Lake City. I started as an interactive designer there, and by the time I left there, I was a creative director for the interactive department. And I gained a lot of confidence there, and won a bunch of awards and stuff, and got confident enough to go out on my own. And my freelance projects at the time were more interesting than the Richter 7 projects, and so I've been on my own ever since. These are some clients I've worked with since I've been on my own. I've been fortunate to work for some big names. We'll talk about that later. This is me in 6th grade. Those ladies obviously had seen Star Wars. This was in 1977 when it came out. And that costume that I made is a bleach bottle, and I had to go home sick because the bleach smell. But I think that that's why I'm a little screwed up. That and some friends gave me acid in 6th grade, and I didn't know what that was. I'm not kidding. It was this little piece of paper, and they said, put this under your... Anyway, I won't get into that. This is my first computer. It was an Atari 400. Is anybody in here old enough to remember Atari computers? Atari 400. It had a keyboard kind of like a microwave. And my parents almost got divorced over this. My dad almost quit his job as an architect, and he bought an Apple Lisa for $12,000 because he had gone to a store where they were premiering this new thing with a mouse, and he came home and told us all about it. He wanted to quit his job, and he bought this thing, and the thing never worked. He had it for a couple of years, and it was a big piece of junk, and you had to run all the apps off the floppy disk, and you're always feeding floppy disks, and it was crazy. It had a black and white monitor, and it was black or white. It wasn't even grayscale. It was just a black and white monitor. It was a massive resolution, 512 by 300 something. And I was in junior high and high school at the time, and I made my own business cards on it. I made signs for a living when I was in high school. Painted signs for farmers and stuff. See, I'm sounding really old now. This is one of my invoices, actual invoices. I kept it. You can see how much I spent on the different supplies with my awesome logo in there, printed on an Apple laser writer or image writer printer. Those Apple leases are actually buried up in Logan here somewhere in a landfill. There's 2,700 of them that were never opened, and Apple disposed of them because the Macintosh came out and just killed the Apple Lisa overnight. And somewhere up here in Logan, there's a bunch of Apple Lisas buried in the ground. Does anybody know where they are? Maybe you've never even heard of the Apple.
They're in the land.
There's now an orchard out there.
Yeah. That was really funny. Right when I got out of high school, there was an ad in the paper, and this sounds so old-fashioned now, but in the old days, you didn't have Monster, you didn't have Facebook, you didn't have LinkedIn. You actually had to look in the newspaper under Help Wanted, and you look under G for graphic design, and there was an ad. I don't remember the exact wording, but it actually said if you've used an Apple mouse, and if you know anything about desktop publishing. So that's how I got my first job. I graduated up to Apple SE Macintosh and worked on that until I went on a mission. I'm from Utah. I was a Mormon missionary in Barcelona. Barcelona was an incredible place. Has anyone here been to Barcelona? Just, it was very, very, very rich, colorful place. It was kind of like heaven for an artist. And nobody wanted us there. But it was a really great experience. This is actually my badge. I got in a fight with one of my companions because he took a picture of me peeing in the forest, but from the front. And so I took his camera and I opened it and I held the film up to the sun while we got in this big fight. That's where the scratches. But Barcelona, I knocked on a lot of doors, went in a lot of buildings, and got to walk the streets there. And the overpowering design that was there, it was just incredible. I have this cool book that I found at a bookstore in Seattle that is all about graphic design in the city of Barcelona. Just all the signage, and everything you see in here was was drawn by hand. It wasn't picked from Shutterstock or iStock Photo. It wasn't, those glasses weren't from commercial PI font on their Mac. They actually drew all this stuff and made all this stuff by hand. These are just different signs for stores, but the typography was just immaculate and inventive and original. It was never the same, because back in 1990 or so, computers hadn't really come on yet, and this was all done by hand. And so you go to Barcelona, and these are just building numbers on buildings, stores. There's some more building numbers. That's the cover of the book, if you can find it. It's a great, really inspiring book to see, really organic design, really stuff done by hand. It's a great book. Just before I went home from Barcelona, I went into a computer store, and the salesman there, he had a picture on, this is the first time I'd ever seen a color computer. And he had on the screen this girl in a bikini. This is a simulation, this isn't what I really saw. I think it was that computer though, but he actually could change the color of her swimsuit and change the pattern on her swimsuit. And I thought that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Partly because I had been celibate forever, and where I was for the last 7 months, I was on the beach. And in Spain, if you've been on the beach there, you know how the women, they wear different things on the beach there. They don't wear some normal components of swimsuits here. So it was a tough place to be. But when I saw this, I was just like blown away. Color, it was like I was seeing a vision. And so I came home, finished my degree at Salt Lake Community College, and got married. That's my wife. And then I'm going to fast forward now quite a bit. I'm just going to jump completely into a different topic. That's just a little bit of background. As a freelancer, you have tons of spare time. You really do. You don't spend 3 hours a day in a car driving to work and back, getting ready, getting dressed, and all those things. The commute is usually wake up, walk down the hall, and sit down at your computer. So I got into running. I ran some zombie race. That's a photo from a zombie race. I got really into running, and that's how much weight I lost. Can you see the notches on my belt? I actually had to make a new hole because I lost like 30 pounds from running. I'm really, really into fishing right now. I go 3 times a week, just up the canyon, Provo Canyon. I'm really into fly fishing, tying my own flies. This hog I caught with that fly that I'd made the day before. Making flies is so fun. The craftsmanship that goes into it. These are tiny flies. These are like, for those of you who are fishermen, these are size 22 hooks, and it's just been really fun. Really into photography. I spent a whole year. For the photographers in here, I have a Canon 5D Mark II and some L series lenses, and I just love going out and taking pictures. This is one I took. It was pitch dark. It was about a 2-minute exposure. You couldn't even see that light on the lawn. And I didn't even know that telephone pole was there, and I just left the aperture open, and you could just see the Milky Way. That's my wife driving up. At the time, I thought she was spoiling the shot, but it made it kind of cool. So, like I said, I try lots of things as a creative director. Basically, I'm a creative director for hire now, and I try a lot of stuff. I auditioned for a play. I got the part of the Tin Man. That's me right there. That's me as Bob Cratchit, Christmas Carol. Theater is cool, and I'd never been in a play my whole life, and so I just try different things. And these next few slides you might not be able to unsee, so I'm just warning you. It's not for the faint-hearted. I was a YouTube personality for a while, singing songs about Flash and ActionScript, and I had some big gripes, and it was my way of coping with technology that was really confusing. This song here is called "Oop, I Can't Understand." It's based on Britney Spears' song, but OOP is actually object-oriented programming, and it's a whole song about how I can't understand the complexities of programming. And I had her on the screen, her music video, and I would copy her movements while I did my song. So I told you this is weird. This is a song I did about CA magazine. If you look in the background, it says copied from Communication Arts 5,732 times. October goal 100. It's about people who just copy. It's kind of complaining about. I've seen so many designers just copy what they see out of CA, and that song was about that. There's some of the lyrics. If you go to designminstrel.com, all my lyrics and all my songs are on there, and they're horrible. I couldn't sing back then. But it was this weird creative outlet. I'm not sure if I'm extremely embarrassed about it or extremely proud about it, but it is really awkward if you watch them. I kind of got a name. I was starting to get featured in Gadget's blog and different things, and kind of got a little bit of sort of the William Hung of graphic design songs. And I went to Flash Forward in San Francisco, and they invited me to sing a song on the stage, and it was called Long Preloader, and it was based on Long December by the Counting Crows. And it was a song about websites that have too long of a preloader. And it was cool. I got a standing ovation, and they had me sing another song after that. And then I completely lost interest. I go from one thing to the other, and I haven't done anything since. This song here, I Want to Get in CA. It's based on the Backstreet Boys song, and it was featured on CA's homepage. It was pretty cool. So, okay, I'm going to switch gears again now because I do that. Does anybody know what this is? Who went to this when it was in town? All right, cool. Basically, Nitro Circus is kind of like Jackass on motorcycles. They do a lot of crazy stuff, and this was in the energy solutions arena. And this is the first case study I wanted to talk about. I was the executive creative director for Nitro Circus for about 4 years, until they lost all their money making the movie that didn't do very well. They've rebounded though; they're killing it now. But I did their brand identity. It was cool to see this. I mean, this screen was gigantic, and it was my logo that I had worked on. That big. It was pretty cool. This was just last Friday, I think it was. And Travis Pastrana is kind of the ringleader. He's the guy in the Red Bull hat. He gets $1 million a year to wear that hat, and Red Bull only gives those hats out to certain people. There's like 10 people who can wear a Red Bull hat. And the reason he's so famous is in the X Games years ago, he completed a double backflip at the X Games and didn't crash and didn't die. I mean, you can see, I don't know if you can tell, but how far do you think that is off the ground in the middle there? Probably 50 feet, 40 feet maybe. And that's rock hard dirt, and it's just crazy. And he landed it, and it kind of catapulted him into the spotlight. They do just these crazy, crazy things with monster trucks and everything. This is a guy who has spina bifida, and he can do backflips off these mega ramps and land them. And he does it pretty amazing. And they just do all kinds of pranks and kind of crazy stuff. This is one I'm proud to say that I came up with this idea for them. This is the Olympic ski jumps up at Park City. And they clear up here, they carried this chicken bucket up to the top of these ramps. I don't know if you've seen these things, but they're really high. They got to the top, and they set up the bucket, and they're like, oh, how do we get in? And they hadn't, you know how when you're trying to get in a wagon when you're a kid, but you're on a hill, the wagon keeps moving? They were trying to get like 8 guys into this bucket and hadn't even really thought it through. They're just meatheads. They don't think it through. So they had to get basically the ski patrol involved, who had some ropes, and the ski patrol tied this kind of winch system, and they all climbed in, and then they let go of the ropes. And it was terrifying. I mean, I thought these guys were all famous, they're all really valuable. I thought they were all just going to get creamed, because this bucket was made out of 2x4s and metal and stuff. And it went right down the middle of that whole ramp, right off the ramp into the water. I was so just the scare. That's one of the. I'm not in the bucket. But actually, in LA or Southern California, Paula, I think is the name of the town where they have motorcycle tracks and stuff. They set up the mega ramp, and I actually had a chance to go down the mega ramp on a big wheel, and I didn't do it because I've seen what happens to some people who try that, but I kind of wish I had now. Travis was on Leno. He actually was dressed really raggedy, and his agent made him stop at JCPenney and get some pants and shoes at JCPenney. And that was kind of funny. It was like an hour before he had to be on Leno, and he was dressed like a bum and had to get dressed up. But He he's probably the nicest guy you'll ever meet. First time I met him, I was starstruck. I mean, I wanted to show him something on my laptop, and my mind went completely blank. Have you guys ever been starstruck? It's like just crazy. And he's like, "It's okay, bud." Put his arm around me. He's very touchy. When we're on a couch, you know, he'll snuggle up and put his head on your shoulder, and just to kind of piss you off. And he's just a really, really high quality guy. But yeah, I was so nervous, I couldn't find the files. Like, I couldn't remember what folder they were in. He's like, "It's okay, buddy, just take your time." And it was cool. But this was their logo. And the problem with the logo was it was kind of too busy. I mean, you guys know about logos. From a distance, it looked like a turd. You couldn't even tell what it was. I mean, you really couldn't. It just, and basically, but they wanted to keep some of the identity. And another way to put it is they wanted to keep the same footprint. So over many, many months of trying to convince them, first of all, to change their logo, but then to get them to agree on one, this is what it turned into. And I'll just kind of go back and forth there. It's kind of like this was their junior high years, and then they kind of started college and had to grow up. And the movie was coming out. That's how I convinced them, is the movie was coming. I said, "We can't use the turd for your logo for the movie. We have to use it." And so this is kind of how it turned out. You can kind of see the before and after. I look at this now and I see all kinds of flaws in it because it was like 3 or 4 years ago. But it's it's just cleaner and simpler. This is another version of it. That's not mine, I don't think. It was cool to see it this big on a trailer. I love seeing logos really big that I worked on. It was only like this for about 2 weeks, and they had so many people following them around that they just painted over it white. So I fortunately got a picture of it before they changed it back. But that was really cool to see the logo that big on their trailer. This is just a trophy truck that the branding got put on. This is from the actual movie. I got to do all the motion graphics in the movie. If you've seen the movie, it's all in stereo 3D. So basically I had to buy a special TV. That TV you saw in my photo, that's a 3D TV. And I had to wear these glasses and stuff. I had to learn all about, the convergence and the 2 cameras and all that. And I haven't done anything since in 3D. But it was thrilling to be able to see your name in the credits kind of go up on the screen, and you're in the megaplex and this thing. It was cool. It was kind of a highlight. And this was from the premiere in Hollywood. I didn't go to it, but I went to other things in that area. So I did a lot of funny little bobblehead animations. If you've seen the show on MTV, I did all the animations for that. And they did, I think, 2 seasons of it, maybe 3. And there were 4 little cartoons per episode that I worked on. And I just wanted, it's kind of indulgent, but I wanted to just show you a 5-minute reel of some of the stuff I did for them. These are some stills, first of all, from some of them. These were actually for their live show. That big screen that I showed you in the arena, when they had this in Australia, these were the cartoons that they kind of showed to introduce the next act, so to speak. And you'll see these in the reel that I'm going to show. So I'm just going to play it. Oh, I didn't really check the sound. I guess I can just play it. Okay, that's the real. There's a lot of hours, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in that 5-minute clip. But that just gives you a sampling of the stuff I got to do, kind of the stuff I've been doing for quite a while. Another case study. Let me just check the time. So we've been here about a half hour. North Face University got sued by North Face, so they changed their name to Newmont University. And Newmont, I worked for them, first of all, when I was at Richter 7, and we did a bunch of stuff for them. And after I left Richter 7, after about a year, they called me and they said, Matt, the reason we hired you, Richter 7, was partly because of you, and we're not happy, we're not getting good service. Can you kind of get involved again? And I was kind of leery about it because it was just an awkward situation. But I worked with them for a while, and I ended up where I just became Newmont's executive creative director on retainer. So I'm still on retainer with them. I'm not an employee, but I'm 60 hours a month working for them. And over time, I finally convinced them to get rid of their logo and to work on it. It was kind of a leftover. No one really liked it. It kind of had this Donnie and Marie Osmond font for Newmont, and it used Euro style, which is a font you don't really use anymore. It may be coming back, though, from what I can tell. But I just needed to go. And so I kind of, Newmont University is it's just a hardcore programming school. It's super expensive. 80% of the students are from out of state. It's actually in Utah. And it's just this programming school, and that's all they teach, just programming, computer science. And I kind of was thinking about the relationship that humans have with devices these days. And I was kind of laying in my bed early one morning. That's usually when I get my ideas, it's just super early. Those aren't my hands. I cut my fingernails a little more often than that. That's a hand model. I was just kind of twirling my iPhone in my hands laying in bed, and I saw an N. And I was like, huh. Because we've been working on ideas forever, and it wasn't going very well. And now this isn't the logo, but this is what I saw. It's just that shape. When I showed this to the client the first time, they thought that's what I was proposing, and they kind of freaked out. That's not the logo. But it was an N, and it was a U, and it was a giant N. It kind of made a lot of sense, and that interaction of a human interacting with a touch device, with a piece of technology, was the core. And I found if you can tell the client a credible story like that, they just snap it up. They love it. It makes total sense to them. And the student body totally bought into it. It just went really well. And this is what the symbol ended up looking like. And it's actually harder to draw than it looks. There's a lot of visual adjustments that went into it. Some things that look parallel are really spread out a little bit, flared out a little, because they didn't look parallel, and there was a lot of correction, a lot of visual subtleties. This transition here gets a little bit thicker as it comes down here because it looked like it was getting thinner. It was a pain in the butt to draw that white negative line going through there because it had to line up at the top of the N and the bottom of the U. I mean, it looks kind of simple, but anyway, for me it was really hard. But the logo ended up being that. That's the main version of the logo that we kind of use as the main one. And this is the logo family. We have different versions of it for different purposes. And then whenever you're presenting a logo, as a client, I would never approve a logo like this because you can't see how it's going to be used. You want to show it in implementations that are familiar, like a T-shirt, like their student shuttle that they have. They were moving it to a new campus that I'll talk about in depth in a minute, where that new campus was going to have a big flag on the top, kind of like the Justice League. They're going to have flags out front. I just showed them sample implementations of this new brand so they could visualize it. And I even took the brand through a 1-year beta test where I would say the whole time, this is not the final logo, we're beta testing the new brand. And it was really great because we found out that orange and the yellow didn't quite work in some cases. We found out how big the N and the U actually had to be reduced because when they're used black, I don't have one, but if the logo's all black, the N and the U look gigantic. So I had to make a special version where the N and the U were a little smaller for when we only use it in one color. There's just stuff like that you learn in the beta test when you're releasing a new brand. This was signage for the new building. And then I put together a really small brand identity guideline. It's that many pages. And it was just so the basics. And we're not going to do a full-fledged brand identity for probably another year because we're still learning how to use the new brand and still experimenting with it. And they've been really good about letting it be that way. This is the building. This is on Main Street. If you've been to the City Creek Mall in downtown Salt Lake, it's just a block up from there, kind of behind this big orange building in the middle there. It used to be the Tribune building. And basically they took it over. They gutted out the whole building. The top floors are all student housing and the bottom 5 floors are the campus. And it's all brand new from top to bottom on the inside. This is how the front looked. They actually had a big fat tree in the front that they wanted to cut down. But it used to be the Salt Lake Tribune's holiday Christmas tree. And President Monson and all these people had an attachment to it, and it was this big problem getting rid of that tree. And so they finally came up with the idea. We actually named it Treebeard. And there was actually a transient who lived in it. And it was his bathroom. I mean, it was disgusting. You go under the branches and there was this whole little weird hideout. And so we finally convinced the city to let us move the tree. So we didn't destroy it. We just moved it to some park. And that was a big relief because it was right in the middle of our prime real estate for showing off our new identity. As you go in the building, this is while it was being worked on. I'll talk about this image later. It'll come up again in the slideshow. But this is what the lobby looked like on the inside. This is an architectural rendering, and then I started putting graphics into it. This is an early version. It changed a lot. But it was cool. It was a way cool project. I got to be involved in the materials, just everything from floor to ceiling. And then this is how it actually turned out. That's a photo of it. And it was just, kind of as a designer, you get lucky a few times in your career to do something really meaningful and really cool. I don't know if I'll ever get to work on something like this again. This is just, I have to pinch myself when I think about this project. And it still looks just like this. That wall back there, we had the painter paint it 4 different times to get the gray right, because it just wasn't perfect. And it was great. The building, like I said, is an old building. You can kind of see what it used to look like. But they restored this whole facade on the front. And this is a before and after. Luckily, the Braza grill finally moved out, and the landlord kind of painted over it. But it turned out pretty cool. You can see these little word marks version of the logo on the windows. And the tree's gone. Can you imagine if the tree was still there, what it would look like? I've designed the flags. This is my early prototypes of the flags. And this is how they turned out. Those flags have been a pain. We're redoing them because they keep wrapping around the poles, and we're trying all kinds of different hardware. But the metal lettering that says Newmont University, I got to design that and work with the fabricator and all that. There's the word mark on the window, view from inside. I'm going to fast forward a little bit here. Starting to work on a bunch of collateral for Newmont now. This is kind of how the new brand is starting to express itself. There's a kit cover I did a press check on the other day. It was turned out really nice. That's my family. We had a big open house, and that was a big day. Had to put that in here. You can see my friend Jamie here in the front there. Okay, this is one of the 2 slides that has bullets. I'm going to speed up because is it 1:45? Yeah, about this. When I play that video, PowerPoint resets its clock, and that totally screws me up. I just wanted to talk really quickly about these different scenarios. When you graduate, you will probably be in one of these environments. A small design studio, ad agency, startup. Do you guys know what an MLM is? How many of you know what an MLM is? If you stay in Utah, you will learn what an MLM is. It's a multi-level marketing company. And it's things like Usana. Basically, they have some guy who was there in the beginning, and he has friends, and it's a pyramid
Yeah.
company. And they're everywhere in Utah, especially down where I live. I actually made a rule in my freelance practice: I will not work with anybody south of the point of the mountain, because it's just crazy down there. These things are all over the place. And then there's the corporation. When I worked at the church, that was a huge corporation, giant corporation, and I learned a lot about that. Being on your own, like I am now, and then eventually becoming an owner or a co-owner. And basically, you start out in a small design studio. I don't know what studio this is, I just found it on Google, but it's pretty typical. You know, IKEA furniture, really old hardware. You know, those Macs are probably 15 years old, 10 years maybe. And you don't get paid very well, you don't get benefits, but the cool thing is you get to sit by the proprietor day in and day out. My first job, I sat here, the owner of the company sat here, and I heard every single phone call that he made and how he dealt with problems, how he dealt with just everything. It was fascinating, and you learn a lot. And if you're in a small studio, you get tons of opportunities. They'll let you work on anything if you can do something cool. These are those MLMs. The easiest way to spot an MLM is they have international flags out front. And not shown in this picture is horrendously horrible architecture. If you go down to Utah County, just go down I-15 and look at these big MLM companies, and it's just crazy. This is actually kind of a nice building. I think that's USANA. But they usually, it's just a volatile environment. They have this frenzied optimism about how their product's going to change the world. And they get a lot of people involved. They usually have a link on their site that says opportunity. And you know, it's like home, about us, opportunity. The opportunity is how you spot an MLM, because they sell you this $100 kit that gets you started. And anyway, and you end up with a whole garage full of vitamins 2 months later. I'm getting old, and I've been doing this a while. I'm getting kind of cynical. I'm not going to discourage you guys too much, I hope. Ad agency. They're cool. It's kind of a hipster environment, kind of a continuation of high school. If you liked high school, you like an ad agency. If you didn't like high school, you probably won't like an ad agency. But you know, you got to have a beard if you're a man. If you have a beard and you're a woman, you probably won't get to work there. But they kind of have this weird, a lot of them have this weird, like, you're in the lunchroom working, and there's like tables and tables, and there's no like walls or anything. This isn't a very good example, but you can kind of tell, when I used to program, this kind of environment was impossible to work in. You know, that part of my brain, if I'm designing or drawing, no problem. But I don't know how they get anything done, you know, lined up like that. But the cool thing about ad agencies is they love awards. They love really great work. They love creativity. It's a great place to work with big names. You can build a resume with a lot of big client names, and it's fun. They work you hard. There's not, about half the ad agencies are sweatshops, and you work 10 or 12-hour days, but the other half, it's pretty much 9 to 5. Richter 7, I did a contract with them for 3 months, a few months ago, where I worked in their offices. It was a ghost town at 4:30 in the afternoon. Everyone just goes home. It's a really family-friendly ad agency. Summit Group, on the other hand, they just work around the clock and just go through people like crazy. So let's see, they have high turnover. People are always quitting. It's just crazy. You start a project, and by the time the project's over, half the team is gone. And the clients get mad. They call up the front desk and like, oh, he no longer works here. And they, you know, kind of freaks them all out. Then they have decent benefits. You know, there's usually 50 or so people in an ad agency, or some of them, some are a lot bigger. Corporate environment, I won't get into that too much because it's kind of like nom for me. I walk by the church office building right now, and I kind of go downtown, because it was a hostile environment in kind of a weird way. It was just so straight. You wore a white shirt and a tie every day, and you couldn't swear when you were mad. And first thing I did, cover your ears, Jamie. The first thing I, you don't have to. First thing I did when I It was so cool to hear the F word at Richter 7. You know, this was just so cool. But I felt like when I left my job at the church, my limbs started to grow back, and by the time I was done with Richter 7, I was back to my old self again. And it's just a really oppressive place to work. It's a great place to work. They paid for my school. They sent me to conferences all the time. I mean, it was a great place to build my Flash skills. I got really into Flash there. Corporations have tons of money, and they'll buy. They don't blink if they buy a $10,000 Mac Pro. You know, where an ad agency they would never do that, or at least a small studio would never do that. And it's very stable, very good. I'm not, like I said, I'm overly cynical. I'm not discouraging people from even working there. It's a great place. You can do some great stuff there. And then we already talked about my lifestyle, freelancer. I'm going to kind of skip ahead. We're sort of out of time. You eventually become an owner of a company, and you kind of change from being a designer to hoping your designers do something cool and hoping you have projects coming in because you got to pay these guys. And I've seen a lot of business owners. When you get old, a little bit older than me, and I'm kind of on the brink of this big cliff, I'm kind of too old to be hip anymore, and I can tell, and so I'm going to probably eventually start hiring some younger designers, and like at one of the studios I work at a lot, Modern 8, the owner doesn't do a lot of design anymore. He's the best designer I know, very articulate, Randall Smith, incredible guy, but he lets his young guys do all the designing. Okay, I'm going to probably skip that. That's how I get how I get people to put me on a retainer, basically. Retainers are great. If you're a freelancer, if you can get a client on a retainer, basically it's cool because you get a regular paycheck and you get some stability even as a freelancer. And if you, in the Q&A session, I can go over that if you want, what we have left of it. Okay, here's just some quick advice, and then I'm done. You're not as bad of a designer as you think you are. And you're not as good a designer as you think you are. When I got out of school, I was the best designer at Salt Lake Community College. That was saying something. No, kidding. I did really well. I got straight A's and everything. I got my first job and I fell on my face. And it was awful. I was no good, and I didn't know that. And so it's just a matter of having some humility, but if you do get discouraged, look at stuff like this and you'll feel really good about yourself. Because there's a lot of bad design out there, and if people are making money doing it, you'll always make money, because you'll probably be better at it than they are. Your mouth can get you into a lot of trouble. If I have any regrets on my career, it's just things where I got too frustrated and kind of lost my mind and was dramatic. And you know, as you start your career, try and be one of those professionals who keeps their cool and who is pleasant to be around even when it gets crazy, because it does. Don't be afraid of computer code. You will learn to program. If you don't learn to program, it's going to be tough to live in the future. You can do anything if you know how to program. If you don't know how to program and you refuse to program, you're going to be like those old people now who never really learned how to use a computer. It's going to be that important. Programming is cool. Even if you're like a fine artist or something, programming is important. If you have a chance to work for a big name, do it, even if it's for free, because you can use that the rest of your career. I love to be able to say I did work for MTV, and I got paid beans to do it. They were the cheapest client I've ever had, and they made so many changes, and they called it the MTV tax. They would just make change after change after change. Those cartoons I did for Nitro Circus, I think it was like $100 a piece or some crazy thing. But I knew it was MTV, and I could say that forever. So if you have a chance to work on a recognizable name, drop everything and do it. I got offered to do the Saratov Approach titles, and that didn't turn into a big movie, but it was a bigger deal than I thought. I just thought it was this little LDS movie, and I didn't really think much about it. And it turned out to be kind of a cool movie, and I could have done the credits for that, and I should have. So it's just a matter of working for big names. Don't burn any bridges. You probably know, in this room, one of your future partners. As you go through your career, you will meet people that you will trust and work well with. Stay in contact with them, And someday you'll probably be partners and own an agency or own a company. So just be really good to everybody you work with. And if you leave a job and you work well with someone, keep in touch with them. It's a lot easier to do that nowadays. Do scary things. Do stupid things. Be interesting. Don't just be a designer. Just try something new all the time. It makes you, the clients love it. I talked to the guy who owns Nitro Circus the other day. I had lunch with him the other day, and he said, I told him about how I was into fly fishing, and he said, Matt, you do something new all the time. I can't keep up with the new stuff you do. It's really important to feed your creativity with trying stuff that's scary and trying stuff that's new. That's one of the reasons I did this today, because it's scary to do stuff like this, but it's rewarding. Learn how to deal with people. If you're not good at dealing with people, I naturally suck at dealing with people. I'm rough on the edges. And these 3 books and a number of others have been incredibly helpful. Basically, I'm still employed because of these books, because naturally I'm not a team player. I'm independent. And that's partly why I'm on my own. And be original. Have some heroes. Be inspired by people. These people change the world. And I think all of us can change the world. I believe that. Learn to be fast. If you're fast, you'll always have a job. If you're really fast at what you do, people love it when you get stuff done quickly. Except for the people who are really slow. Whenever I stop reading books, I get really dumb. And I'm not articulate. I hum and haw. I say a lot. Keep reading. Read the classics. Be familiar with all that. Reading is good, really, really good for your brain. Last of all, this is my last slide. This is really telling because the building that Newmont inherited was an old technology, the newspaper. You would actually walk in through these doors in the old days with a little card, fill out, count the characters, and say, okay, here's my wand ad, and you pay your $1.50, and they put your little ad in the paper. That's basically what that says there. And if you don't keep fresh, if you don't keep learning new things, it's really, really easy to become obsolete really quickly. Dave and I went through the demise of Flash. I mean, it's kind of dead now. And I've basically made a living doing Flash for 10 years and got really good at it, and nobody wants it anymore, or very few people want it. I hope you don't teach it still, but there is a definite place for Flash still. But it's not as popular as it once was. And just stay relevant. Do you guys know what lynda.com is? Do they use that here at all? Yeah, I learned After Effects from that. I learned all kinds of programs from that. It's the one thing I pay for every year. It's worth the money. It's like $300 a year to be a member of that. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. I don't even know what time it is. I can't see. Do we have time for any questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, question. I'll let you think for a minute if you have any.
When you were talking about doing ads, or the new design for the university, and you were saying you're giving it some time before you, I don't really know how to do that exactly, to give it time to figure out if you're willing to do that or not.
You were talking about the beta period?
Yeah, the beta period.
When you're going to spend that much money on flags and signage and all that, you learn stuff as you like. I did those room signs, and we had a mock-up made, and the yellow was too light, and so I was glad we didn't do all 50 of them. Are you asking kind of how do I convince the client to do something like that?
I guess I'm just wondering like how you kind of do that transition, like having your logo up but not really calling it the official logo.
We do use it as the new logo. We launch it, but we don't spend all the money to build the brand identity guidelines. We don't buy a whole bunch of expensive stuff. We don't have all the signage done. We don't have, most of our publications weren't designed yet. We're starting on those now. We have a catalog for the university that's like 30 pages, and I personally believe that you just need to try out a logo for a test run. And if you just kind of arrogantly say this is the new logo, it looks crappy in a couple of places,
Yeah.
and you can't fix it. Where if you set the expectation that it's a beta, then you don't look dumb for one thing, because you kind of say, hey, you know, this is a beta after all, you know, if it doesn't work out. So that's kind of the idea. What else?
You're talking about your first interactions with working with Nitro Circus. I'm just curious how you made the transition to getting those contracts with these different large names as a freelancer with no
Okay.
sort of agency to back you or have those connections there.
The cool thing is when you work at an ad agency, that's another thing. I mentioned work with big names if you can. Work with a big name agency if you can too. 'Cause you go in and you say, I was a creative director at Richter 7. You immediately have their respect. It was like, oh, I've heard of them. They have those billboards on the freeway. And I walked into the Nitro Circus office. The way I connected up with them originally is one of the account managers at Richter 7 did a side project for him, and he introduced me and I showed him some Flash stuff. And I remember I walked into their offices and I said, I have never ridden a motorcycle. I don't know if I'll even fit in here or not. But well, I did once, and I did that thing where you throttle it and you go through a fence. What's it called? There's a name for it.
Throttle or something?
What's that?
Whiskey throttle?
Yeah, some crazy thing. You kind of panic and freeze up, and then you just go. It's like skiing when you don't know what to do. But yeah, I connect. The way I connected is because I had worked for a credible company, and I also had pretty freaking amazing Flash skills. I had this 3D engine that I had built, and I showed them their site. None of you have probably seen it, but it was all Flash site, and it was all in 3D, and you could zoom around to the different areas in this universe. It was all in 3D. And I had that 3D engine built, and I put a couple of their graphics into that 3D engine. I showed it to them, they were blown away. And I remember Greg Godfrey, one of the partners, said, where'd you find this guy? And I knew I was in when he said that. It was cool. And I never really did fit in with those guys. I'm not a gearhead like those guys. I'm not a meathead. I mean, I had worked at the church for 12 years, for heaven's sake, you know. So. But yeah, I love being a designer because I didn't know anything about that world, and now I'm pretty familiar with the action sports world. That's the cool thing about being a designer. Anyone else?
You said when you thought you were really good when you were in college, and then you got out and you always thought you perceived it that way. My question is what would you tell students right now to be able to prepare us for jobs out there?
Don't get lazy while you're a student. If you think it's easy to get an A, don't go for the easy A. Just rework it and rework it. I think the best thing, though, is to expose yourself somehow to real agency work and try and, you walk in and it's weird. The best way to know what how good your portfolio is as soon as you go like this and show it to an important person. And you can see all your flaws in that second you do that. And I'll never forget, this is back in the old days, I'll tell it really quick. Famous photographer gave us a transparency of his best Grand Canyon photo. And he sent us a copy. Back then it was film, this is stuff called film. And he sent us a copy and the colors weren't as good. So we convinced him to send the original 4x5 transparency. And it was back when Macs were first starting. And my boss got the bright idea to lay it on the scanner and get this light off of you guys will know what this means probably. You know what a Lucy is? It's like a projector that you can, basically it's like a 5,000 watt bulb, okay? Laid it down on this scanner. I had a bunch of photos to scan, but stupidly put down this transparency. And I started fiddling with the scanning software, and I smelled something burning. Picked it up, this boil about this big right in the middle of this transparency. And it was just crazy to have that, just to have that experience. But I don't know why I was telling that story now, really. It's a cool story, though.